Eugenie Sage.
Pleased to take a call on the Environmental Reporting Bill. Well, government members can claim that they are reforming government in terms of environmental management, but the concept of comprehensive state of the environment reporting certainly is a key part of improving environmental management in New Zealand. But it's the way that you deliver reform that's important. And this bill potentially will do more to disguise the state of our air, water, biodiversity and coast than it will do to provide New Zealanders with fair, accurate picture of New Zealand's environment, why it is like that and what that means. And Mr Speaker, we've had a very stop-start history to state of the environment reporting in New Zealand, both in developing indicators and producing reports. We've only had two nationwide state of the environment reports in 1997, 2007, and then absolutely nothing since then. So that was why the Green Party supported this bill's introduction, and we hoped and worked to try and achieve a genuine consensus across the House. But the government has persisted in rejecting the efforts of opposition members, both in Select Committee and through the committee stages, with a number of quite detailed SOPs to try and improve the bill. Because, Mr Speaker, we don't want, because of the way in which it undermines independence, having the Ministers for the Environment and the Minister of Statistics selecting the topics that are to be reported on in both the domain and synthesis reports. That was something that many submitters opposed, and yet the government persisted in politicising what should be an objective and independent process by giving the regulation-making powers to ministers solely to enable them to choose the topics to be reported on. And, Mr Speaker, it's really disappointing that all of the changes in relation to this Clause 18 that we put forward in Select Committee were rejected. But another reason that we're opposing this bill is the poor quality of environmental information which the government is prepared to accept as valid in terms of state of the environment reporting. The Taranaki Regional Council released its State of the Environment report for the region in July. And it really highlights the shortcomings of this regime, because the government minister, Mick Smith, went up to Taranaki to launch the report, and that report didn't even follow the Ministry for the Environment's own rules in terms of collecting water quality data. Because the Regional Council only followed the Ministry's guidelines for measuring water quality at 2 out of 18 swimming spots in the region. MFE requires weekly surveillance during the 5-month summer recreational period. It requires samples to be collected from a minimum of 20 data points, regardless of weather conditions. But what did the Taranaki Regional Council do? It only collected 13 samples in good weather conditions at 16 of the spots. So by collecting data in good weather conditions, it didn't look at that variation that you get when you've got heavy rain and then the much increased faecal coliform and nutrient runoff. So that completely skewed the information, and it failed to tell families about the risks related to swimming at their favourite swimming spots. So when you've got the minister endorsing a State of the Environment report from a regional council which didn't even meet the Ministry for the Environment's own guidelines for state of the environment information, then how can we trust the information that's going to be produced under this bill? And then, Mr Speaker, when the government has given us so far a very bland report on air quality, when we are not seeing the sort of information that we need, that New Zealanders need to actually understand what is happening in terms of environmental quality, we don't think that this bill is actually going to deliver what New Zealanders had expected. One of the other flaws in the bill is its focus on providing best available data. That means that there's no provision when reports are done to include any requirement to generate information that's not currently collected, to include any requirement to identify gaps in the data. And we've seen that regional and district councils collect a lot of environmental information. That is often for their own purposes, for their own priorities. It's not for pulling together a national data set. So their methods of analysis, their methods of collection, as we've seen in the Taranaki example, are often very different. And so the bill, in relying on local authorities to collect that information, will simply fail to provide a good mechanism to collect comprehensive, accurate data from across New Zealand when there's no requirement that they do this in a consistent way. And also in the budget this year, the government failed to provide any additional funding to local authorities or MFE to ensure that there was good quality reporting. So it's been yet another example of the government loading responsibilities on local authorities but not providing funding to assist in the implementation of the laws that Parliament is passing. And, Mr Speaker, when the disclosure statement on the bill said, and I quote, direct costs associated with this new environmental reporting framework will have to be managed within existing baselines, we know that same sums of money are being spread more and more thinly over a wider variety of priorities. And when it cost MFE in 2007, it took 28 staff and 200 other people to produce the 2007 report, when there's been no additional funding that I can find in the vote in MFE to assist with State of the Environment reporting, other than the allocation to the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, then how is MFE going to ensure that the information is good quality and accurate? What other priority work is going to be sacrificed in order to respond to their responsibilities under this legislation? So, Mr Speaker, the Green Party had wanted to support this bill. We need to have a good consensus on the law around State of the Environment reporting, but because the government has repeatedly rebuffed attempts to improve the bill, it's rebuffed efforts to ensure that State of the Environment reporting was independent, was not a politicised process, didn't have the ministers choosing the topics to be reported on in both the domain and synthesis reports. We cannot support this bill because while we need robust information about the health of our environment to ensure that we make good decisions, we are not convinced that this bill will establish the framework and the regime to actually achieve that. Instead, it risks, by the Taranaki example, where poor quality information has been used to claim that waterways in Taranaki are in a good state, it potentially risks misleading New Zealanders about the state of our biodiversity, about the state of our water quality, and not providing them with the fair, accurate picture that we need.
Dennis O'Rourke.